First of all, I wanted to ask you about obesity levels in adults. Between 1995 and 2008, obesity levels in adults between 16 and 64 increased in Scotland. Do you think that Scotland will ever manage to shake off its poor diet and lifestyle that it's always had?
No, because at the moment it's the worst of the lot, if you like. So we're the worst, the sick man of Europe. And I can't imagine that people are going to change that much. For example, at a football match, I was at a football match recently, and the incentives for whatever, Iron Brew was sponsoring something, so they pull up with a bus afterwards and say, oh, free Iron Brew to everybody. So then it becomes associated with football. So it's so ingrained into the culture. Fizzy drinks, sausage. We just walked down the road there and there's a fish and chip shop with an offer for lunch. First thing on offer is sausage roll. People are so into these kind of foods, it's just inherent within the culture.
So you don't think they're ever going to shake off this kind of love for kind of greasy foods and fizzy drinks and alcohol and things like that? You don't
Absolutely not. No. I think some people have improved, some people want to improve, and I think that you can do that, but for some people their perception of enjoying themselves is purely eating drinking and smoking, and that's their lifestyle. So how are you going to get someone like that to change? Huge amounts of money. And you've got to have huge investment of, some kids who come from backgrounds which are quite deprived. How are they going to know about healthy eating unless they're exposed to it at school? In which case we need a big investment in teaching kids how to cook, trying these other foods, training them to taste differently. Because at the moment, people are trained to have a taste for these salty, sugary foods. They're not trained to eat apples or bananas for snacks or have glasses of water with meals. Water is one example, because water is trendy now, so people sell it as a drink, so you buy a bottle of water. So yes, that's good. That's stupid though, because you can just get it out of the tap and then save the money. But then I'm old and probably not trendy, and I don't understand the marketing behind it all.
So what type of health problems are we seeing in the young people of today's society that we didn't have 20 years ago?
In Scotland or
in Scotland, yes.
In Scotland, well, you're starting to get people developing diabetes in their teens. So that's type 2 diabetes. 90% of people who develop it are either overweight or obese. And generally speaking, it used to be a disease of the middle age, so my age, mid-40s to 50s. You've been fat for a good 20 years by then. You've worn out your pancreas, you start to get symptoms of diabetes. Now children are getting that disease and requiring treatment. And not in Scotland to my knowledge, but certainly in the States, children are now getting surgery to manage their obesity. And it's crazy, and although it's a fringe surgery at the very end, if you think about it, it's like we're all shifting off to the right. Overweight and obesity is becoming normalised. So you see kids in adverts or whatever who are fat. So it's all like it's acceptable and it's normal, but it's not, it's dreadful. And it's the opening the door to such poor health and disability. Dreadful.
So, do you think that fast food outlets are at fault for offering unhealthy food at a cheap price, or do you think individuals need to take more responsibility for their own health?
Well, they're in business to make money, so you can't blame them. What I do object to is fast food outlets becoming sponsors to elite events like Coke, sponsoring the Olympics. What's that all about? So it's like Iron Brew on another scale. So I don't think they're at fault, but it's all demand-led. So unless we get a taste and demand it, then we'll end up, I would buy that. If I had no money, I would go and buy that for a snack. I wouldn't go to Pret a Manger and buy a more expensive sandwich. I'd buy the cheapest. But you see, Greggs, some of the stuff at Greggs is all right and cheap. So you can buy, I don't know, steak slices or whatever, which are very, very fatty. But you can also buy just like an egg roll, an egg mayonnaise roll or ham rolls and things like this, and they're relatively competitively priced. So I think that if you have got the savvy, you can buy fast food that's relatively okay.
Do you think that the Scottish Government is doing enough to tackle the problems of obesity and people with overweight problems in Scotland, or do you think that you think about Alex Salmond and the fact that he's the SNP leader, like, even though you see him, he's quite a hefty man, you know, do you think that's a bad representation of Scotland, the fact that he's the First Minister and people have voted for him, and yet, okay, he might have some good policies, but is he practising what he preaches about good health and nutrition, and yet the fact that he's a very overweight man himself, do you think that that's a bad reflection of Scottish policies on things like obesity in Scotland?
Gosh, I don't know if you could say that. I think politics doesn't seem to lead, you don't lead an active life if you're in politics, from my observation anyway. You don't have any time for yourself really, and you've no time to exercise. You'll be going to dinners all the time. I think, I'm trying to think, although who are the other leaders? They all, Tavish Scott looks like he's never going to win anything, but you know, Annabel Goldie's overweight. A lot of them nationally are overweight.
Do you think that sets a bad example for people watching these politicians, that the fact that they're not actually, although politicians can be blamed for not practising what they preach and, you know, all these promises during the election time that aren't kept, do you think that's bad, that people are seeing these people in power and yet these are the ones that are overweight and they're maybe hypocritical, talking about improving the diet of Scotland?
Well, I don't know, because I'm a member of the dietetics profession, right, and cynics would say that a good 50% of the dietetics profession are overweight. I'm lucky enough not to be overweight, but that's because I work at it. So, practice what you preach is a difficult one. I don't know, you can... See, people turn around and then say, oh well, I mean, it's not... A fat dietitian advising someone to lose weight, people will say, well, you couldn't not employ her on the grounds if she's well qualified, and she's this, that and the other, and she interviewed well. The fact that she's fat, oh well, then that would be prejudice if you didn't employ her. She's the best candidate. So it's a difficult one. I take your point. But to answer your other question, which was about Scottish Government and money for obesity, I mean, I just don't know that anywhere could put enough money in. They've got the obesity route map, which is a kind of an attempt to start the process of managing overweight and obesity. My first thing would be saying, we'll stop the planners giving permission to anyone to build supermarkets out of town, because, you know, no one can get there on the bus, and, you know, that's the first thing. So if you have everything local, people will walk, and that's public health galore. So I mean, there are things that they can do, but it's so complicated, I think, to influence government policy. Really, I think it's a nightmare. But I do think they're starting to, they realise there's a problem. But, I mean, how much money would you need? You just need so much money. They're making a start. They're making a start. They're probably doing more than the UK government or the England and Wales lot. But I just think it's one of these huge amounts of costs. You never get enough money to pay for it. Because you've got different pots. You've got the pots to pay for all the fat diabetics to have the treatments. And then you've got the other monies that are laid aside for leisure facilities, for example. So you say, oh well, I mean, if you save money on them, you could pay that for more leisure. But it doesn't seem to work like that. To manage money within budget seems difficult. Very difficult.
So, on to my last question. This is slightly off topic from obesity, but many students find exams stressful, which affects the immune system. What types of food should students be eating during their exam periods?
Okay. Right, well, it would be very simple advice. The first thing is, if you preoccupy the exams, the easy thing to do is miss meals out and not have regular meals, and that affects your energy levels, your well-being, etc. So if I was a student running out of time, I would go and lash out or make things like soup, rolls, things like that, so you've got quick food that's good for you, and so it'll take away this hunger, and then you could manage what you eat. Because clearly, when you're under stress, some people react by not eating. Some people react by eating a lot of sweets and things like that. And that's just the way the individual reacts. But the key thing, I think, would be fruit and veg and regular meals. And then over and above that, you know, you'd have to follow your own way of coping with stress. But I think these caffeine drinks and loads of caffeine would give people headaches. But for some people, if they've got to stay up all night, that's what they would do, drink that sort of stuff and stay awake.
They prove to be very popular, these like Red Bull and these kind of caffeine drinks. What kind of effect long term does that have on individuals?
Minimal effect, I would say. They're also very expensive, so I would say, why don't you make cups of tea and coffee and drink those? Because I think the caffeine in 2 or 3 cups of coffee is the same as a tin of you'd have to check this out, of Red Bull. And again, if money is tight, then that would be a more economical way of getting that, unless you like that particular drink.